and welcome to the dedication of a historical marker for the Rolling Mill mine disaster. My name is Barb Zaporowski and I'm the Dean of Library Services at Pennsylvania Highlands Community College, and I conducted the research to get this marker today. Before we begin the official ceremony, however, I'd like to thank everyone who contributed financially to the fund that made the casting of this monument possible. This includes the Community Foundation of the Alleghenies, Rosebud Mining, Edwin and Rosemary Pulowski, Slovenian Savings and Loan, Concurrent Technologies Foundation, numerous individual contributors, and most importantly, the members of the United Mine Workers of America, particularly Local 6410, Local 1257, Local 1386, and Local 1368. Finally, a special thank you to the Johnstown Public Works Department who did the installation of the sign poles. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Frank Janakovic, Mayor of the City of Johnstown.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to welcome everybody to Johnstown this evening. Thanks for attending. We're gathered here today in remembrance of the Cambria Ironworks Rolling Mill Mine disaster on July 11th, 1902. Although Johnstown is probably recognized more for the 1889 flood and the loss of over 2,200 lives, the 1902 mining accident was a pivotal point in helping to change the face of mining in Pennsylvania and Johnstown. As Johnstown was still recovering from the 1889 flood, just a little over 3 years later, it faced the Rolling Mills disaster and a loss of 112 lives. These disasters and heartaches should probably have ended most cities' aspirations of growth, expansion, or even a desirable place to live, but not for those people calling Johnstown their city and their home. This actually made the city and its people, I believe, stronger. Johnstown continued to grow throughout the early 1900s to over 50,000 people working in the mines and the mills. My grandfather and uncles all worked in the mines, so I can remember some of their stories. And actually, my oldest uncle Vic was killed in a mining accident in Roseville. So I'm sure it hit a lot of families and a lot of us close to our hearts. In 1902, there were 648,743 new immigrants to the United States, mainly from Eastern Europe. These include persons from Poland, Czechoslovakia, Croatia, and Hungary. These immigrants found work in both the anthracite and bituminous mines in Pennsylvania. The bituminous region of Western PA was also struggling with the influx of new immigrant labor. To validate this impact, in the Kansas City neighborhood of Johnstown, within a 10-block area, there were St. Stephen's Church Slavish, Immaculate Conception St. Mary's German, St. Casper's Polish, St. Rochus Croatian, which I was involved, and St. Columba Irish and St. Emmerich Hungarian. And each had their own parochial schools when I was growing up. Most people lived in company houses and were walking to work from their homes. Let's see if I skip through this one. As Johnstown is currently looking at a rebranding of our city and promoting being geared more towards tourism, exploring our natural resources, and as a destination for visitors, let us never lose sight of how we got here and always celebrate those who got us here. Never lose sight of those immigrants, our grandparents, family, and ancestors, along with our history, ethnicity, and heritage, shared today in part by some of the events we have, like our Ethnic Fest, our Slavic Festival, and other cultural events. And finally, we promote the beauty of all our natural resources, which I don't think we appreciate not only in Johnstown, but throughout our entire area. The mountains, cleaning up the rivers, wildlife, hunting, fishing, and all the beautiful scenic views that we have. Remember, it was those underground resources, mining and coal and steel making, that first brought people and workers to our city. Thank you very much.
To introduce Dr. Steve Nunez, President of Pennsylvania Highlands Community College.
Good evening, everyone. Hey, I'm a former teacher of 15 years, so I can speak really loudly, but let's pull it together a little bit. So it's really, I know it must be difficult to hear. So I spent hours and hours and hours writing this, so you know I want to make sure. All right. Well, thanks for being here. What an awesome night. And what an awesome dedication. And thanks to everybody, whether you had a small part or a large part in what's happening here today. Thank you so much for taking the time, for making a donation for this event. Very much appreciated. She's running around the corner there, but I don't think that this could happen without Dr. Barb Zaborowski from Pennsylvania House Community College. She is the organizer and the leader of this event. Let's give her a round of applause. Part of the role of a community college is to engage in all aspects of our community. It's in our name, for goodness sakes, right? And sometimes that includes engaging with our own past. Pennsylvania Highlands Community College is committed to helping preserve and understand the history of Johnstown and Cameron County. The research that went into this marker revealed the story behind the tragic event of this event here in Johnstown, which would ultimately have a profound impact on the mining industry all of Pennsylvania. I have some knowledge about mining accidents myself. I was born and raised in Southwest Virginia, where there is a strong history and culture that still exists for the mining community. And in fact, the greatest mining disaster in Virginia was in Tazewell County in a mine called Laurel Mine, and that is the county adjacent to where I grew up and was raised. So it has some meaning to me. And that mining disaster happened on March 13th, 1884. The disaster in Tazewell County was caused by an explosion of mine gas that created such an explosion that it blew houses off of their foundation or obliterated them completely. That explosion resulted in the death of 112 miners on that terrible, terrible day in Tazewell County. Coincidentally, 112 miners were also killed in the explosion of Rolling Mill Mine of Johnstown in July 10th, 1902. And as was mentioned here by our mayor, most of those miners were immigrants. Many of them speaking different languages and not always understanding one another, but what unified them was the very dangerous job of mining culture. The impact of this tragic loss on Johnstown families would have been palpable at that time. One newspaper article described the local scenes. I'm going to read a little paragraph from the local newspaper. The wife of Frank Hopke, a young German Pole, threw herself upon the lifeless body of her husband, and her cries moved the stoutest of hearts to tears. When the officers sought to remove her in order to take the body home, she resisted desperately, winding her arms around the dead man's neck and pressing his cold lips to hers, and shrieking into his deaf ears hysterical words. It is through the dedication of historical markers such as this that we are reminded of what has come before us and what binds us to our past. On behalf of Pennsylvania Highlands Community College, I am proud that we are able to be part of this remembrance and commemorating the ultimate sacrifice of these miners. Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce Frank Grumbine, Community Preservation Coordinator for the Central Region, Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission.
I want to thank the previous speaker, Mayor. Thank you for everybody for being here. And thank you to my wife for being here with me. Her family is from Johnstown and Windber, and when I saw this opportunity, I wanted to make sure that I could come out here and be a part of this, because it's a truly significant part of the history and the narrative of this place. our physical connection to not only the mind, but the familial connections to those who were lost in the disaster. It continues to reverberate in all of our lives, but it also, it also inspires hope. Yeah, greetings to all of you on behalf of Governor Tom Wolf and the members of the staff of the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission, which is the Commonwealth's official history agency. And congratulations on dedicating today the newest of nearly 2,500 historical markers across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. These markers chronicle the people, places, events, and innovations that have made this Commonwealth a cradle of heritage for our nation. There is a reason why Pennsylvania is the Keystone State. The Historical Marker Program, which had its beginnings in 1946, is now one of the most popular and innovative programs of the Historical Museum Commission. Each marker establishes an important link to the past and recognizes agents of change that have generational impacts in Pennsylvania. This marker is not the end of this story, but will instead provide encouragement for further study, discussion, and remembrance. James Roderick, Chief of Bureau of Mines in 1902, said once he reached Johnstown, he at once saw by the excited crowd that some terrible calamity has occurred. The streets were filled with anxious and excited people. While in the street opposite of the rolling mill mine and at the entrance where the dead bodies were laid out, they were nearly impassable. I mingled unknown with the sorrowful crowd and was viewing the dead bodies which were laid out in rows, waiting to be identified by relatives and friends. Indeed, the scene was heartrending. Pennsylvania, having been an international leader in resource extraction throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, did so at the expense of environmental and human devastation. The rolling mill mine disaster was one such tragic event which resulted in the significant loss of life. Many of those recently arriving in Pennsylvania in search of new opportunities, to just have those opportunities to be stripped from them. This Pennsylvania historic marker recognizes this horrific event and its perpetual impact on the Commonwealth and its people. It serves as a memorial to those who perished in one of Pennsylvania's deadliest mining disasters, while inspiring hope and change for future generations and the people of Johnstown. I am honored to be here to represent the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission in the dedication of the rolling mill mine disaster, and thank you all for being in attendance today to commemorate this event. Thank you.
Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dan Kane. He is the International Secretary Treasurer Emeritus of the United Mine Workers of America.
Secretary Treasurer Emeritus, what that means is I'm retired. So I don't have any official responsibilities anymore. But I do want to thank everybody on behalf of President Roberts and Chucky Neisel, our District 2 International Vice President, who wanted to be here, but they're at a picket line in Alabama. We're fighting for a contract down there, have been for some time, but they asked me to convey their best wishes. You know, when I started in the mines back in 1971, I was fortunate and I was so grateful that the union was already in our mine. You look at places that don't have the union yet, like the rolling mill mine. What did they face? One of the responsibilities I had as a local officer going back to the early 70s was when there was a fatality, I had to visit the family and make sure that everything that they had coming was taken care of, that they got all the information that they wanted, and it was a really sad duty. I can't imagine what it would be like to multiply one of those visits I made by 120 times. It's just incomprehensible. The men who worked at the rolling mill mine didn't deserve what they got, but their families went on to demand more safe mining conditions, better pay, health care. When they were killed in the mines, one of the things you'd have to tell the family was, there's no health care anymore. The company, they don't pay that once you're dead. And they don't let you stay in the house. You get thrown out of the house. I can't believe that anybody would do that, but that's what happened. And it wasn't until the United Mine Workers got organized around here that people got safe working conditions mandated, good benefits, decent pay. Back at the time of the rolling mill mine, we didn't have safety laws. What we had was safety suggestions. If the coal company didn't want to obey the law, they just didn't. And there wasn't much that the inspectors could do. We've come a long way since then. And I hear a lot of people talking nowadays about how we'd like to go back to the way things used to be, back to the old days, like the good old days. The good old days weren't so good for a lot of people, and they certainly weren't good for coal miners. When I got out of college in 1971 and went to work sinking mine shafts, after the first day on the job, I came home and told my wife, I think there's something in the Geneva Convention that says they can't make prisoners of war victims. It's a tough job. It really is. But people who have been through it, they've earned their pensions now, they've earned their health care, especially their retiree health care, and that wasn't easy. We had a long, hard fight to restore our health care benefits, and we finally got it done. That's why I really, truly believe that everybody who works for a living in this country, whether you're in a mine, a mill, a factory, anything like that, you should belong to a union. I hear all this talk about right to work. What about the right to work for fair wages? What about the right to work for decent conditions? So I just close by saying to all those people who want to go back to the good old days, I want to remind you of something my grandfather always told me. He says, boy, you be careful of what you ask for, because you might get it. And that's what we're
So please come over and join us there. Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Let me welcome you to Casimir Cultural Center. My name is Steve Nunez. I'm one of the owners. You'll see if you have a program, it's supposed to be Chad Peischer speaking. That's the other owner. He's sick, he can't be here today, so I was conned into taking his spot from him. But we're so glad you could all be here. As most of you know, this was St. Casimir's Roman Catholic Church for people of Polish descent for a long time. And a lot of the parishioners that died in the, people that died in the mine were parishioners here. In fact, the cornerstone here was laid in 1902. Construction stopped for quite a while until they could recuperate from their losses. So it's a very proud moment for us to be able to have it open here, to have this commemoration here today. And once again, welcome you all. We're going to start the program today by the solemn reading of the names, which I'll do, and then we'll move on from there. Thank you. Frank and Anthony Andrzejewski, George and Andrew Babella, Victor Baccia, Peter Barrett, Steve Berestich, Stephen Barna, John Bartok, Mike Basinetz, Emmerich Basista, Jacob Bilshivsky, William Blanche, Frank Bomer, John Bozak, Andrew and Michael Bulishchak, Michael Bolish, Yosemite Sabola, Vincent Chesla, John Colton, John and Jacob Crook, Paul Severna, Anton Seibert, Anton Delish, Rinaldi Dovziensky, Ladish Dombrowski, Michael Drishka, Michael Evok, John Faber, Joseph Franco, John Galida, Andy Garogli, John Dombaski, Frank Gushik, Gottfried Hepke, John Hullett, George Holiak, Andrew Havaldo, Jacob Hall, Stephen Emirshak, Michael Yushko, John Karosoviach, Ladis Kaba, Anton Killian, Paul Klotch, Joseph Kovak, Stephen Kochish, John Krajowski, Andrew Kubenko, John Locko, Gustav Lewandowski, Anton, Paul, and Frank Lazarski, William and Daniel Lees, Jacob Maslowski, Philip and Michael McCann, Andy and Mike Moskal, John Novak, Lawrence Pazanlak, Wojciech Pekla, George Peterasak, Valentine Plaga, Frank Pozniak, George Prahovich, Michael Prazuhi, Wojciech Grzbila, John Raidia, John Ritalik, Joseph Ristic, John Rapicki, Michael Sabat, John and Peter Sandor, John Sedlak, Ludwig Schlonka, William Shanzak, Michael Shilovinets Sr. and Michael Shilovinets Jr., Stephen Simla, Jacob Sirvas, Vasily Spontek, Peter Shupak, John Strashinsky, Arhel Sutula, George Tavrosny, Branish Tetkovsky, J.R. Thomas, Frank Taberski, Joseph Tomlinson, John Tayuja, Tony Vergash, Paul Vrabel, Martin Verbio, Jakob Walczyk, John Wallawender, Peter Wahova, Valentine Vedzlovsky, John C. Whitney, Michael Wilk, Boleslaw Wisowski, Michael Wojciech, Adam Wakopowski, Joseph Yurudovich, Joseph Zaba, Andrew Zidel, and Stanis Ziolka. At this time, we'll invite Monsignor Balta up for the prayers for the deceased.
Blessed is our God always, now and forever. Amen. Have mercy on us, O God, according to your great mercy. We pray, hear us, and have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. And let us pray for the repose of the souls of these departed servants we have remembered. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. For mercy of God, for the kingdom of heaven, and for the remission of their sins, let us receive Christ, the immortal King and our Lord. Grant it, O Lord. Let us praise the Lord. Lord have mercy. O God of spirits and of all flesh, you trampled death and broke the power of Satan and granted life to the world. Now grant rest, O Lord, to the souls of these your departed servants who are remembered in the place of light, joy, and peace, where there is no pain, sorrow, or mourning. As they kind and gracious God, forgive every transgression committed by them in your dear God, so that since there is none of you that does not sin, you alone are without sin in your justice, is everlasting justice, and your word is the truth. We are the resurrection of life, and the repose of these your departed servants, O Christ our God. And we glorify you together, your eternal Father, and your holy, gracious, and life-giving Spirit, now and ever and forever. Amen. Glory be to you, O Christ our God. Glory be to you. Glory be to the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and ever and forever. Amen. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Give the blessing. In Christ our true God, rules of the living and the dead, place the souls of these his departed servants who perished in this tragedy in the order of the saints. Grant them rest in the bosom of Abraham and others among the just. Through the prayers of his most holy Mother, the holy, glorious, and praiseworthy apostles, and of our holy God and fathers, and of all the saints, and may he have mercy on us and save us, for he is gracious and loves mankind. In blessed repose, grant eternal rest, O Lord, to the souls of these your departed servants, and render their memories eternal memories, eternal memories, blessed repose and eternal memories.
Now I'd like to invite Brother George Goulash for another prayer. And then immediately following, there'll be a musical interlude, and you're welcome to some refreshments in the back. Thank you.
Let us pray. Father of mercies and God of all consolation, you pursue us with untiring love and dispel the shadow of death with the bright dawn of light. Comfort the descendants, the families of these, our beloved deceased, in their loss and sorrow. Be our refuge and our strength, O God, and lift us from the depths of grief into the peace and light of your presence. Your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, by dying has destroyed our death, and by rising restored our life. Enable us, therefore, to continue to press on toward him, so that after our earthly course is run, he may reunite us with those we love, and every tear will be wiped away through Christ our Lord.